Fleet Admiral Soyoung walked through the ruins of the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime and marveled at how completely everything had changed. The crystalline towers that had once reached toward the stars like monuments to alien power now lay in shattered pieces across the planet's surface. They had not been destroyed by human weapons or explosives. They had simply stopped existing when enhanced human consciousness decided they were no longer needed. The transformation was complete. Now humans no longer required starships to travel between worlds because they could fold space around themselves through will alone. They did not need complex computers for calculations when their evolved minds could process information faster than quantum processors. Most remarkably, they had developed the ability to grant other species the same evolutionary potential they possessed. The proud Vorthic warriors who had once enslaved human miners were now lining up to learn from their former victims. Commander Vexstar, who had demanded the destruction of Earth just months ago, was now begging Captain Jinwoo to teach him how to feel empathy and compassion. The blue-skinned warrior wept openly as human emotions flowed through his mind. For the first time in his life, the changes in alien psychology were as dramatic as the technological shifts. Nixari scientists, whose crystalline bodies had seemed perfect and unchanging, discovered they too could evolve when guided by human knowledge. Diarzalmar, a researcher who had spent centuries believing his species was at the peak of development, was now growing new neural pathways that let him understand concepts that had been impossible for his people. Captain Jingwu had become something far beyond his original human form, but he retained the compassion and wisdom that made him a natural teacher. He established schools throughout the galaxy, where former enemies learned to cooperate instead of compete. Vorthic children played alongside human kids while their parents worked together on projects that benefited everyone. The galaxy power structure had not collapsed, it had evolved. The old system based on conquest and domination was replaced by mutual growth and shared strength. Worlds that had been stripped mined for resources became centers of learning where different species helped each other reach their full potential. Engineer Hyjin, who could now create technology through thought alone, built educational facilities that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Students from dozens of species attended classes where they learned that consciousness itself could evolve beyond the limitations of biology. The barriers between different forms of life began dissolving as everyone discovered they were part of a larger cosmic intelligence. The most remarkable change was in how conflicts were resolved. Instead of wars between species, there were now collaborative explorations of potential different groups would work together to imagine better solutions to galactic problems. When disagreements arose, enhanced humans would facilitate discussions where every participant could feel what others were experiencing. Former slave worlds became the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The humans who had suffered under alien rule for 50 years used their enhanced abilities to help their former oppressors understand what they had done wrong. Forgiveness flowed both ways as species that had been enemies for millennia learned to see each other as family. Young children born after the Great Awakening displayed abilities that made the first generation of enhanced humans look primitive. 12-year-old Minjun could communicate with the fundamental forces of the universe itself. 10-year-old Sojin had developed the ability to heal damaged planets just by visiting them. Teenager Wu Yang could create new forms of life by imagining them into existence. But perhaps the most beautiful change was that enhanced humans retained their essential humanity despite their godlike abilities. They still laughed at jokes, cried at sad movies, and formed deep friendships with beings who had once been their enemies. The power that could reshape reality was guided by hearts that remembered what it meant to be small and vulnerable. Admiral So-young established the new galactic government in what had once been the council chambers, but the structure was completely different. Instead of representatives from different species making decisions for everyone, the new system was based on collective consciousness. Every sentient being in the galaxy could participate in discussions about important issues. Decisions were not made by voting or debate, but by achieving understanding. When different groups had conflicting needs, enhanced humans would help them explore solutions that benefited everyone. The process was slower than the old authoritarian system, but the results were solutions that every species could support enthusiastically. The economic system transformed as well. Instead of competition for limited resources, the galaxy now focused on expansion of consciousness and ability. When beings could create matter and energy through focused thought, scarcity became a concept from the ancient past. Trade between worlds involved sharing knowledge and experiences rather than physical goods. Captain Eugen established the first interdimensional trade routes where different species could visit alternate realities and learn from versions of themselves that had made different choices. The cargo she carried was not materials or manufactured goods, but possibilities and dreams that could be shared between different forms of consciousness. The universe itself seemed to approve of these changes. Reality became more flexible and responsive to conscious will, as if it had been waiting for intelligent life to mature enough to become partners in creation rather than just consumers of existing resources. Stars burned brighter near worlds where enhanced beings were learning to work together. Dr-SEO now existed as a distributed consciousness that could be present on thousands of worlds. Simultaneously, she established research centers where the fundamental questions of existence were explored, not through experiments but through direct experience. Scientists from different species would meditate together and discover the underlying principles that governed reality. The greatest discovery was that consciousness itself was the basic building block of the universe. Matter and energy were just expressions of aware intelligence that had forgotten its own nature. Enhanced humans helped other species remember who they really were and what they were capable of becoming. As the new galactic civilization matured, the differences between species became less important than their shared potential. A Vorthic engineer and a human artist would collaborate on projects that created beauty and function simultaneously. Nexari mathematicians worked with human philosophers to develop new ways of understanding existence itself. The irony was not lost on anyone who remembered the old galaxy. The species that had been dismissed as the weakest link in the cosmic chain had become the teachers and guides for everyone else. The aliens, who had spent 50 years trying to keep humans weak and divided, had accidentally created the very force that would elevate all of galactic civilization to heights no one had imagined possible. Admiral So Young often stood in the rebuilt council chambers and reflected on how the universe had orchestrated this transformation. The ancient records spoke of cycles where consciousness evolved through conflict and challenge. Humanity had been the catalyst that triggered the next phase of galactic development. But they had not done it alone. Every species that had attacked humans had contributed to their evolution. Every weapon used against Earth had become a tool for human advancement. Every attempt to suppress human potential had instead fed their growth. The galaxy had been unconsciously collaborating to create its own transcendence. The children born in this new era would never know the fear and hatred that had defined the old galactic order. Human and alien youngsters grew up together, learning that differences in biology were just variations in how consciousness chose to express itself. They could share thoughts and feelings across species barriers and work together on projects that spanned multiple dimensions. Captain Jinwoo established the final memorial on Earth in the place where the first alien invasion had landed 50 years ago. The monument was not built from stone or metal, but from crystallized memories that visitors could experience directly. Anyone who touched the memorial could feel what it had been like to live through the transformation from both human and alien perspectives. The memorial told the complete story of how the universe had lied about humanity power, not through deception, but through a kind of cosmic patience. The truth had always been there, waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Humans had never been weak. They had been sleeping gods who needed the right kind of challenge to wake Upas fleet. Admiral So Young prepared her final report on the transformation. She realized that this was not really an ending, but a beginning. The galaxy that had once been divided into competing empires was now a unified consciousness exploring the infinite possibilities of existence. Every being was both student and teacher in a cosmic school where the curriculum was discovering new ways to grow. The universe had indeed lied about humanity power, but only in the way that a parent lies to a child about their potential. The lie was not meant to deceive, but to protect until the moment when the truth could be safely revealed. Now that moment had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same. The tides had not just turned, they had become a tsunami of consciousness that would carry every species in the universe toward a future that none of them could have imagined. The emergency war fleet of the Galactic Council arrived at Earth, expecting to crush a small rebellion. Instead, they found something that made their most experienced commanders question everything they knew about warfare. Every human world had transformed into a fortress defended by beings who treated the laws of physics like gentle suggestions. Luna Base was now commanded by General Sungho, whose tactical abilities had evolved beyond anything in recorded galactic history. He could predict enemy fleet movements 3 hours before the aliens made their decisions. His enhanced mind processed probability streams and tactical variables faster than quantum computers. When the massive alien armada dropped out of hyperspace expecting to find primitive human defenses, they instead discovered that every defensive position was already aimed at exactly where their ships would be. The alien fleet consisted of 500 warships representing the combined military might of 12 different species. Vorthic dreadnoughts bristled with plasma cannons that could boil oceans. Nexari crystal ships carried weapons designed to shatter planets. Zephyrian cloud vessels could phase in and out of normal space, while the metallic Corvan battleships were armed with antimatter torpedoes. Against this overwhelming force, Earth could field exactly 37 converted human vessels. Most of them had started life as cargo freighters or passenger transports. The largest human warship was still smaller than an average alien cruiser by every measure of traditional military science. The humans should have been annihilated in the opening minutes of battle. Captain Yujin commanded the defense fleet from her transformed vessel, the Rising Phoenix. What had once been a simple cargo hauler was now something that existed partially outside normal space-time. She could phase her entire ship through solid matter or make it completely invisible to enemy sensors. Her crew included former insurance salesman Park Min-ho, whose analytical abilities had evolved to let him calculate weak points in enemy armor just by looking at their ships. The battle began when the alien fleet opened fire with enough concentrated energy to destroy a small moon. Their weapons lit up space with deadly rainbows of destruction that should have vaporized anything human-made. Instead, they watched in growing horror as their most powerful attacks were absorbed by human shields and converted into energy for the defending fleet. Engineer Hyjin, who had started the war as a simple maintenance worker, was now something far beyond human limits. She could interface with any technology in the solar system just by thinking about it. When the alien weapons fired at Earth, she reached out with her mind and turned their own targeting systems against them. Enemy missiles designed to destroy human cities instead locked onto alien ships and detonated in their own launch bays. The transformation had accelerated beyond anything the aliens could have imagined. Human children born after the awakening were displaying abilities that made their enhanced parents look normal. 8-year-old Su Young could communicate telepathically with every computer system on Earth simultaneously. She coordinated the planetary defense network with the casual ease of a child playing a video game. Teenager Byung-ho had developed gravitational manipulation abilities that let him create localized black holes with his bare hands. When Corvan antimatter torpedoes approached Earth, he simply opened spatial rifts that sent the weapons into empty space or redirected them back at their launch ships. The aliens found themselves being destroyed by their own most advanced weapons, but the real shock came when the Vorthak High Command deployed their planet-killer weapons. These massive constructs were the size of small moons and carried enough firepower to crack worlds apart. They had been used to destroy entire civilizations that defied the Galactic Council. High Admiral Kethmar personally commanded the assault, confident that no evolved humans could survive weapons designed to end all life on a planet. The planet killers charged their main weapons and prepared to fire beams that could penetrate to a world core and cause complete planetary destruction. The energy buildup was visible from 3 star systems away as the weapons gathered power that could sterilize continents. Every alien in the fleet expected to watch Earth die in a spectacular explosion that would end the human problem forever. Instead, something impossible happened. When the planet killers fired their devastating beams at Earth, the entire human population simply absorbed the energy. 9 billion enhanced humans working together reached out with their combined will and pulled the destructive force into themselves. The weapons that should have ended human civilization instead provided the power needed for humanity. Next phase of evolution. Dr. Minnesio, who had spent months studying the transformation process, felt the change happen in real time. Every human on Earth and throughout the solar system was suddenly connected in a vast network of shared consciousness. They could feel each other's thoughts, share each other abilities, and coordinate their actions with perfect precision. The effect on the alien fleet was immediate and catastrophic. Human ships that had been outnumbered 15 to 1 suddenly moved and fought as a single organism. Every vessel knew exactly where every other ship would be and what it would do. The aliens found themselves facing an enemy that could predict their every move while remaining completely unpredictable. Themselves, Captain Jinwoo Soul Guardian had evolved far beyond its original form. The ship now existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously and could appear anywhere in the solar system instantly. His crew had become something that transcended individual identity. They were nodes in a vast human consciousness that spanned interplanetary space. The battle that should have lasted hours was over in 23 minutes. The alien fleet that had come to destroy humanity was completely annihilated without losing a single human life. The planet killer weapons were converted into power sources for human development, and the surviving alien crews found themselves facing beings who could grant or take away life with a thought. High Admiral Kethmar sent a final transmission before his flagship was destroyed. We underestimated them. They are not just evolved humans anymore. They have become something the galaxy has never seen before. Warn the Council that we have awakened something that should have stayed sleeping, but there was no one left to receive his message. The communication networks that had connected the Galactic Council for thousands of years had stopped working the moment humans decided they should. Every alien technology in the galaxy was becoming unreliable, as if recognizing a superior form of life. The transformation was spreading beyond Earth now. Human colonies throughout the galaxy were reporting similar evolutionary jumps. Enhanced human traders were visiting alien worlds and simply by being present were causing local technology to malfunction. Alien governments that had ruled for millennia were finding their control systems failing as human consciousness expanded across space. On Nexus Prime, the former center of galactic power, the crystalline towers that had reached toward the stars for 10,000 years began to crack and fall. The Nexari leadership tried desperately to maintain control, but their technology was becoming less responsive with each passing hour. It was as if the universe itself was choosing new masters. The proud Vorthok Empire that had conquered hundreds of worlds found their ships losing power and their weapons refusing to fire. Their warrior culture was built on domination through superior technology, but that technology was becoming useless against opponents who could absorb and redirect any attack. Admiral Hyansu received reports from across human space that confirmed what everyone already knew. The age of alien dominance was ending, not through conquest or destruction, but through simple obsolescence. Human consciousness had evolved to a point where alien technology could no longer function in their presence. The galaxy that had spent 50 years keeping humanity weak and divided had succeeded only in creating a unified force that made their entire civilization irrelevant. The hunters had become the hunted, and the prey had evolved into something that transcended the need for hunting at Alas. Admiral Hyansu stood on the bridge of Soul Pride and watched the debris of the alien fleet drift through space. He realized that this was not really a victory in any traditional sense. It was more like a graduation ceremony. Humanity had passed some kind of cosmic test and was now ready to take its place as the dominant consciousness. In the galaxy, the universe had been waiting for this moment for millions of years, and now that it had arrived, there was no force in existence that could stop what was coming next. Admiral Hyansu stood on the command deck of the dreadnought Soul Pride and watched his transformed fleet prepare for humanity. First Real attacked. The ships looked almost identical to the old human vessels from the outside, but everything beneath their hulls had changed completely. Engines that once struggled to reach half-light speed now moved faster than Nexari interceptors, weapons that barely scratched alien armor, now cut through energy shields like they were made of tissue paper most. Importantly, the crews themselves had become living weapons engineer. Inho could now interface directly with the ship computer systems using only his thoughts. Weapons officer Sungmin could target enemy vessels by feeling their location in space. Rather than using traditional sensors, Navigator BOREM calculated hyperspace jumps by visualizing the folded dimensions of space-time in her mind. The target was the Vorthek mining colony on Ceres. For 30 years, enslaved humans had dug precious metals from the asteroid while their blue-skinned overseers treated them worse than animals. The colony held over 10,000 human prisoners who had been worked nearly to death in the deep tunnels. Captain Jinwoo, Soul Guardian, would lead the assault with his crew of transformed soldiers. The attack began at exactly 0600 hours Earth time. Jinwoo's ship dropped out of hyperspace right on top of the Vorthek defense platforms. His weapons fired before the aliens even knew humans. Where their plasma bolts that once took minutes to charge were now firing continuously in streams of deadly energy. The defense platforms exploded like firecrackers as human weapons tore through their shields. Vorthek fighters scrambled to intercept the human fleet but found themselves facing opponents who no longer played by the old rules. Pilot Taeyong twisted his fighter through impossible maneuvers that should have killed him from the acceleration forces. Instead, his enhanced body absorbed the stress and his ship responded to his thoughts faster than any control system. The Vorthek weapons fired their most powerful disruptor cannons at the human ships, expecting to see the familiar sight of human vessels exploding in bright flashes. Instead, they watched in horror as the energy was absorbed into the human hulls and redirected back at them. Engineer Hai Jin had learned to convert any incoming attack into fuel for the human defense systems. What followed was not a battle, it was a demonstration of how completely the balance of power had shifted. Human ships that should have been destroyed in the first minutes of fighting were not only surviving, but getting stronger with each attack. The Soul Guardian hull was actually growing thicker and more advanced as Vorthek weapons hit it on the surface of Ceres. The real shock came when human marines landed to liberate the mining colony. Sergeant Jae-sung led a squad of soldiers who had been transformed by months of exposure to alien technology. They moved through the underground tunnels faster than the security systems could track them. Their enhanced senses could detect Vorthek guards through solid rock walls. The enslaved human miners had undergone their own transformations. After decades of working with alien equipment, Sang-wook, a miner who had spent 20 years digging in the deepest shafts, could now survive in hard vacuum without a pressure suit. His body had learned to process the trace atmosphere found in asteroid caves. Worker In Young had developed X-ray vision that let her see through solid stone, making her invaluable for finding hidden alien weapon caches. The Vorthek overseers who had terrorized human workers for decades found themselves facing opponents they could not understand or defeat. Miner Dongsu had been beaten nearly to death just last week for working too slowly. Now he was lifting 1,000-pound ore containers with his bare hands and throwing them at his former captors. The liberation of the mining colony took exactly 47 minutes. What should have been a desperate rescue mission against impossible odds turned into a casual stroll through alien defenses that could no longer function against enhanced human abilities. The Vorthek garrison surrendered after watching their most advanced weapons bounce harmlessly off human skin. News of the victory spread across human space at faster than light speed. Earth government officials who had spent 50 years apologizing to alien masters were suddenly receiving reports of total victory against supposedly superior enemies. The celebrations began immediately and continued for days as more reports of human success arrived, but the real message was being received by the Galactic Council on Nexus Prime. The species they had dismissed as weak and primitive had just destroyed a heavily fortified military installation without losing a single ship. The implications were terrifying. If humans could do this to a minor colony, what could they do to major alien worlds? The Nexari response came within hours. A battle fleet of 30 crystal ships arrived at the Ceres system, expecting to find human forces celebrating their small victory. Instead, they discovered that The entire asteroid had been converted into a human fortress in less than a day. Enhanced human workers had somehow restructured the rock and metal into defensive positions that could withstand planet-killing weapons. Captain Eugene commanded the defense from what had once been the Vorthak Command Center. Her ship, the converted freighter New Bisin, had been transformed into something that defied every law of physics. She could phase the entire vessel in and out of normal space, making it impossible for enemy weapons to target. Her crew included former accountant G1, whose mathematical abilities had evolved to let her predict the outcome of battles before they happened. The Nexari attacked with their most powerful crystal cannons, expecting to crack the asteroid apart like an egg. Instead, they watched their energy beams get absorbed and converted into power for human defense systems. The fortress weapons that fired back at them were using their own energy, amplified and focused into beams that could cut through crystal armor like it was made of glass. High Admiral Kethmar of the Nexari fleet sent a desperate transmission to Nexus Prime. How are they doing this? Their technology should be centuries behind ours. These are the same primitive humans we have been dominating for 50 years, but they were not the same humans. The species that had once begged for mercy was now demonstrating abilities that made alien science look primitive. Enhanced human children were playing with gravity fields while their parents casually walked through solid walls. The transformation had reached a point where normal physics barely applied to them anymore. The battle for Ceres lasted 6 hours and ended with the complete destruction of the Nexari fleet. Not a single human was killed, while 30 of the galaxy's most advanced warships were reduced to floating debris. The enhanced humans had not just won, they had made victory look effortless. Admiral Hyunsu sent his report back to Earth Command. The enemy fleets have been eliminated with 0 casualties on our side. The liberated miners are requesting permission to convert more asteroids into human strongholds. They believe they can turn the entire belt into an impregnable fortress within months. The response from Earth was immediate permission granted. Convert everything you can find. We are no longer hiding from the galaxy across human space. The news of victory had an electrifying effect on the population. People who had lived their entire lives as second-class citizens in their own solar system were suddenly proud to be human again. Enhanced children who had been hiding their abilities were now demonstrating them openly. Parents who had feared for their families' safety were now confident that humanity could protect itself. But the most important change was in how humans saw themselves. They were no longer the weak species that needed alien protection. They were the force that alien empires needed protection from. The psychological shift was as dramatic as the physical transformation had been. Captain Jin Woo stood in the liberated mining tunnels of Ceres and watched former slaves work alongside his enhanced crew to build something the galaxy had never seen before, a human military base powered by abilities that made alien technology obsolete. The miners, who had spent decades being brutalized by Vorthak overseers, were now casually manipulating matter at the molecular level to create defenses that could stop planet-killing weapons. The first strike had been a complete success, but more importantly, it had announced to the galaxy that humanity was no longer hiding. The species that had been pushed around for 50 years was pushing back. And the aliens who had created this situation were about to discover that they had made the biggest mistake in galactic history. The war for human freedom had begun, and the opening battle had shown that it would not be a war at all. It would be a revolution that would change the fundamental balance of power in the universe forever. Kyung-soo was working in his rice fields outside Bizan when the crashed Vorthak fighter fell from the sky. The massive alien ship was easily 50 tons of twisted metal and crystal technology. It landed in his crops and crushed half his harvest. He should have called the authorities and waited for them to remove it. Instead, something strange compelled him to touch the wreckage. The moment his hands made contact with the alien hull, he felt electricity run through his body. The sensation was not painful. It was like being plugged into a power source he never knew existed. His muscles began to grow larger and stronger right before his eyes. When he tried to move the fighter out of his field, he discovered he could lift the entire ship with his bare hands. 300 kilometers away in a factory in Seoul, Bo Young was working her normal shift when Nexari soldiers burst through the walls. They were searching for human workers to take as slaves. Their crystal armor made them nearly impossible to stop, and their weapons could cut through concrete like paper. Bo Young tried to hide behind a metal support beam, but they found her. Anyway, one of the Nexers grabbed her arm and tried to drag her toward their transport ship, but when she struggled against them, something incredible happened. She walked right through the solid metal wall like it was made of air. The alien soldiers stared in shock as she passed through steel and concrete without any effort at all. She escaped by walking through 6 more walls and disappearing into the city in Tokyo. A university student named Ji-hoon was studying late in the library when he accidentally knocked over a display case containing Nexari crystal fragments. The pieces scattered across the floor, and he bent down to pick them up. The moment he touched the largest crystal, his mind exploded with new sensations. He could suddenly feel every object in the room without looking at them. He held up his hand and focused on a heavy textbook sitting on a nearby table. The book rose into the air and floated toward him. He could move it left, right, up, down with just his thoughts. Other students in the library watched in amazement as Ji-hoon made dozens of objects dance through the air around him. These incidents were happening all across Earth and human space. Ordinary people were manifesting abilities that should have been impossible. Professor Yoon Kyung at Seoul National University was collecting reports of these transformations from around the world. Her research team was working around the clock to document and understand what was happening to humanity. The data was overwhelming. Farmers were developing super strength after touching alien technology. Factory workers were phasing through solid matter. Students were moving objects with their minds. Soldiers were healing from wounds that should have been fatal. The changes were not random. They followed patterns that suggested some kind of hidden programming in human DNA. Kyung genetic analysis revealed that human chromosomes contained vast sections of supposedly junk DNA that were now activating. These sequences appeared to be instructions for abilities that had been dormant for millions of years. Contact with alien technology was somehow switching them on like flipping light switches in a dark room. The transformations were accelerating too. People who had been exposed to alien science weeks ago were now showing secondary and tertiary abilities. A construction worker who had gained super strength was now also developing enhanced reflexes and improved eyesight. A teacher who could read minds was learning to project her thoughts into other people, but the most dramatic changes were happening to the humans who had the most contact with alien technology. Captain Jin Woo crew aboard the Soul Guardian were becoming something beyond normal human limits. Engineer Hai Jin could now control any piece of alien equipment with her mind. She would place her hands on Vorthak computers and instantly understand how they worked. Navigator Taemin had developed the ability to see hyperspace routes as colored lines in the air. He could calculate jumps that would take alien computers hours to process. In just seconds, Dr. Young Ho was healing people by laying his hands on them. He could repair broken bones, cure diseases, and even restore damaged organs with nothing but touch. The most remarkable case was Private Subin, the Marine who had resisted Nexari mind control. She had developed telepathic abilities that went far beyond reading thoughts. She could now project human emotions into alien minds. When she focused on captured Vorthak warriors, they would begin experiencing human feelings like compassion and guilt for the first time in their lives. The effect was devastating to the aliens. Their entire culture was based on strength and domination. When they suddenly felt empathy and regret for their actions, many of them fell into deep psychological shock. Some Vorthak soldiers actually defected to the human side after experiencing what it felt like to care about other beings. News of these transformations spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions to discuss what they were calling the human problem. High Counselor Vexstar of the Vorthak demanded immediate military action. He wanted to destroy Earth before the humans became too powerful to stop. The Nexari had a different approach. They wanted to capture and study as many transformed humans as possible. Their scientists believed they could reverse engineer human abilities and apply them to their own species, but their attempts to kidnap enhanced humans were failing spectacularly. A Nexari raid on a small farming community was stopped by a 12-year-old girl named Su Jin, who had developed the ability to generate electromagnetic pulses with her brain. She disabled all their technology with a thought, and the raiders found themselves stranded on a hostile world surrounded by angry humans with supernatural abilities. The alien response was swift, and desperate Vorthak battle fleets began moving toward human space, while Nixari science vessels prepared to harvest human specimens, but they were already too late. The transformation had reached a tipping point where it was spreading faster than they could respond. Children born after the awakening began were showing abilities from birth. 8-year-old Minjung could communicate with computers telepathically. 10-year-old Haewon could manipulate gravity fields around her body, allowing her to fly through the air. Teenage Seungho had developed the ability to phase in and out of normal space-time, making him nearly impossible to catch or harm. The aliens were finally beginning to understand the scope of their mistake. They had spent 50 years using their advanced technology to suppress and control humanity, but every weapon they used, every piece of technology they deployed against humans had been feeding a transformation that was turning their former slaves into gods. Professor Yoon Kyung published her findings in a report that shook both human and alien governments. Her conclusion was simple and terrifying: humanity was not evolving into something new, they were returning to something ancient. The genetic sequences being activated were older than current human civilization. They suggested that modern humans were actually devolved descendants of a species that had once ruled the galaxy. The implications were staggering. If her theory was correct, then the aliens had not conquered a primitive species. They had accidentally awakened a race of beings that had been sleeping for millions of years. Now those beings were remembering who they used to be and reclaiming abilities that made current alien technology look like stone tools. Captain Jinwoo stood on the bridge of his transformed ship and watched the stars with new eyes. He could feel the change spreading through human space like a wave of awakening consciousness. Ordinary people were becoming extraordinary, and extraordinary people were becoming something the universe had never seen before. The age of human servitude was ending, and the age of human dominance was about to begin. The galaxy that had laughed at humanity for 50 years was about to discover what it meant to be afraid. Dr. Min Seo walked through the underground laboratory beneath Seoul and tried not to think about how everything she knew was wrong. The concrete walls were covered with alien technology that should have killed everyone in the building weeks ago. Vorthak power cores glowed with deadly radiation that could melt human bones in seconds. Nexari neural implants pulsed with energy that drove most species completely insane. But the human workers around her were not dying, they were getting stronger. Her research team had been studying captured alien weapons for 3 months. Dayun the linguist could now read alien languages without using translation devices. Her brain had somehow learned to process information in ways that should have been impossible. Woojin the physicist was solving equations that normally required massive computers. He would look at complex mathematical problems and just know the answers like they were written in his mind. The strangest case was Jusung, a maintenance worker, who had been exposed to pure Nexari crystal energy for 6 hours. Everyone expected him to die horribly. Instead, he had developed the ability to see through solid metal walls. His eyes would glow slightly when he used this new power, and he could find hidden alien devices that their best scanners Miss Admin SEO checked her latest test results and felt her hands shake. The numbers made no sense at all. Workers who should have radiation poisoning were showing increased muscle mass and bone density. People who breathed toxic alien atmosphere were developing better lung capacity. Humans exposed to mind control devices were becoming more intelligent instead of going crazy. The door to her office opened and Hanuel, the communications officer, rushed in. "Doctor, you need to see this," she said. Her face was pale and her voice was shaking. "I intercepted some alien transmissions and translated them. The Galactic Council is talking about Isman SEO." Looked at the datapad Hanuel handed her and read the translated messages. Her blood turned cold as she realized what she was seeing. The aliens were not discussing humans like they were a weak conquered species. They were talking about them like they were a dangerous threat that needed to be controlled. One message from a Vorthak commander said, "The human absorption rate is increasing faster than our models predicted. They are not just surviving our weapons, they are making them part of themselves." Another transmission from a Nexari scientist was even more frightening. The ancient records were correct. This species grows stronger through conflict. Every attack we make feeds their evolution. We may have made a terrible mistake. Min SEO sat down hard in her chair and tried to understand what this meant. The aliens had conquered Earth 50 years ago because they said humans were the weakest species in the galaxy. But these messages suggested something completely different. The aliens had invaded Earth because they were afraid of what humans might become. She called up the historical files on her computer and started reading through old Galactic Council records. Most of the information was standard conquest documentation, but buried deep in the archive she found references to something called the adaptive species. The files were heavily encrypted, but Dayun new language abilities helped her break the codes. What they found made both women stare at their screens in shock. The records spoke of a species that appeared weak and primitive but possessed the ability to absorb and improve any technology used against them. The files said this species had been wiped out millions of years ago, but the descriptions matched humanity perfectly. Meanwhile, in the military, medical facilities across Earth, similar discoveries were being made. Sergeant Jae-sung had taken a direct hit from a Vorthek disruptor cannon that should have vaporized him. Instead, he was running faster and hitting harder than any human soldier. In history, Private Subin had been captured by Nexari forces and subjected to weeks of mental torture, designed to break alien minds. She came back more focused and mentally sharp than before. Corporal Dong Hyen had been left for dead on an airless moon, breathing toxic gas that killed most carbon-based life forms. He not only survived, but developed the ability to process different atmospheric mixtures. His lungs had somehow learned to extract oxygen from compounds that should have been poison. The pattern was becoming clear to Min Seo and her team. Humans were not adapting to alien technology in the normal way. Evolution usually took millions of years, but humans were changing in months or even weeks. Their bodies and minds were rewriting themselves to not just survive alien attacks, but to become stronger because of them. She decided to run a controlled experiment using volunteer soldiers who had already shown signs of enhancement. The results were beyond anything she had imagined. When exposed to low levels of Vorthek energy weapons, the volunteers' muscle density increased by 40%. When given small doses of Nexari neural stimulation, their IQ scores jumped by 60 points. The most shocking discovery came when she tested human blood samples that had been exposed to alien technology. The DNA was changing in real time. She could watch genetic sequences rewrite themselves under the microscope, as if the human genome contained hidden instructions that were being activated by contact with alien. Science Captain Jinwoo arrived at her laboratory 3 days later. His crew had been showing the most dramatic changes of any humans in space. Engineer Haijin could now interface with alien computer systems just by touching them. Navigator Taemin was calculating hyperspace jumps without any navigation equipment. Dr. Young Ho was healing injured crew members by placing his hands on their wounds. Jin Woo looked tired but determined. Doctor, what you have discovered here changes everything. If humans are really this adaptive species, then we have been living a lie for 50 years. The aliens did not conquer us because we were weak. They conquered us because they knew we would become strong. Min Seo nodded and showed him her latest findings. Captain, the genetic changes are accelerating. Every human who has been exposed to alien technology is passing enhanced traits to their children. The next generation will be born with abilities we are just now developing. She pulled up a projection that showed human genetic evolution over the next 50 years. The curve was exponential, rising faster and faster until it disappeared off the top of her charts. If her calculations were correct, humans would soon possess abilities that made current alien technology look primitive. But there was something else in the data that worried her. The alien races were also changing, but in the opposite direction. Every time they attacked humans and failed, their own technology became less effective. It was as if the universe had some kind of balance and human strength was being paid for with alien weakness. Jin Woo studied the projections and asked the question that was bothering both of them. How long do we have before the aliens realize what is happening and try to destroy us completely? Min Seo checked her timeline calculations and gave him an answer that made them both afraid. Based on the rate of change and the alien communication patterns, I Estimate we have maybe 6 months before they panic and throw everything they have at Earth. That night, Min Seo stood on the roof of her laboratory and looked up at the stars. Each point of light represented worlds where humans were discovering impossible new abilities. The galaxy had spent 50 years feeding power to the very species it had tried to suppress. Now that species was waking up, and the universe was about to learn what humanity was really capable of. The transformation had begun, and there was no way to stop it. Humans were becoming something the galaxy had never seen before, and the aliens, who had created this situation, were finally starting to understand the magnitude of their mistake. Captain Jinwoo pressed his face against the cold metal window of his ship and watched the alien fleets move through space like deadly dancers. He had seen this sight 100 times before, but it never stopped making his stomach twist with shame. The Vorthak ships glowed bright blue as they cut through the darkness. Their hulls were smooth and perfect, like they were carved from a single piece of crystal. The Nexari vessels looked like floating mountains made of pure diamond. They moved without sound, without effort, like gods playing in the stars. His own ship, the Soul Guardian, was a joke compared to them. The hull was patched with metal scraps from a dozen different worlds. The engines made horrible grinding noises that could be heard 3 decks away. When they fired their weapons, the whole ship shook like it might fall apart. The alien captains probably laughed every time they saw it approaching. So Young walked up behind him and cleared her throat. She was his second in command, and the only person on the ship who still believed they could win fights. Captain, the enemy fleet is moving into attack position, she said. Her voice was steady, but Jinwoo could hear the fear underneath. They have 40 ships, we have 12. Jinwoo nodded and turned away from the window. 12 human ships against 40 alien monsters. It was not even a fair fight. The smart thing would be to run away like they always did, but something deep in his chest was tired of running, tired of being the joke of the galaxy. Tell all ships to hold position, he said. So Young looked at him like he had lost his mind. Sir, if we stay, they will destroy us in minutes. Maybe, Jinwoo said, but maybe not. The first alien attack came exactly as expected. The Vorthak ships fired their plasma cannons, and bright green death filled the space around the human fleet. Jinwoo watched the energy beams streak toward his ships and waited for the explosions. He had seen this happen so many times before. Human shields would fail, human armor would melt, human crews would scream as their ships died around them, but something strange happened. The Soul Guardian shook when the plasma hit, but it did not explode. The lights flickered, the crew fell down, but the ship was still alive. Jinwoo looked at his damage reports and could not believe what he saw. Hull integrity at 80%, shields holding at minimum power, engines still running. Sir, So Young said, her voice full of confusion. The enemy weapons barely scratched us. That was impossible. Human technology was garbage compared to alien science. Everyone knew that. The Galactic Council had said so for 50 years. They ran tests and proved that human weapons were useless. Human shields were weak. Human ships were flying coffins, but the Soul Guardian was still alive when it should have been space dust. The Nexari ships moved forward next. Their crystal weapons could cut through any armor like it was made of paper. Jinwoo had seen them slice human battleships in half with a single shot. Now those same weapons were aimed at his fleet. He gripped his chair and waited for death. The crystal beams hit the human ships, and something impossible happened again. The beams bounced off the hulls like they were hitting mirrors. Some of the energy was absorbed into the human shields, making them stronger instead of weaker. Jinwoo stared at his screens and tried to understand what he was seeing. Engineering report came. Hyjin voice over the speakers. Captain, our hull is actually getting harder where the enemy weapons hit us. It's like the ship is learning how to defend itself. That made no sense at all. Human ships were built with basic materials from Earth. They used simple nuclear reactors and chemical rockets. Nothing fancy, nothing special. The aliens had technology that was thousands of years ahead of anything humans could build. Their weapons should have turned the human fleet into glowing gas, but the human ships were not only surviving, they were getting stronger. The Soul Guardian weapon systems came online, and Jinwoo felt his heart skip a beat. The guns that usually took forever to charge were ready to fire in seconds. The targeting system that normally could not hit anything was locked onto 6 different enemy ships. Fire all weapons, Jinwoo ordered. The human fleet opened fire, and the aliens got their first real surprise in 50 years. Human plasma bolts that should have been weak and slow were moving faster than light. Human missiles that usually missed their targets were hitting every time human energy beams that normally bounced off alien shields were cutting deep holes in enemy hulls. The Vorthik commander sent a message that appeared on Jinwoo's screen. How are you doing this? Your technology is primitive, your weapons are toys. Jinwoo did not have an answer because he did not understand it either. But he was starting to feel something he had not felt in years. Hope was growing in his chest like a warm fire. The aliens were confused and afraid. He could hear it in their voices, see it in how their ships were pulling back. The battle continued for 2 more hours, and the impossible kept happening. Human crews that should have died from radiation were walking around like nothing happened. Human engines that should have exploded were running better than ever. Human weapons that should have run out of power were firing continuously without stopping. Taemin, the navigator, called out from his station. Captain, I am reading something strange. The enemy ships are losing power every time they attack us. It's like we are draining their energy somehow. Yang-ho, the ship doctor, sent his own report from the medical bay. Captain, the crew members who were hit by alien weapons are healing faster than normal. Some of them are showing increased strength and better reflex. Jinwoo walked around his bridge and looked at his crew. They all looked the same, but something had changed in their eyes. They moved differently, like they were more aware of everything around them. Hyjin's hands seemed to glow slightly when she touched her control panels. Taemin was calculating navigation routes in his head without using any computers. When the battle finally ended, 20 alien ships were destroyed or disabled. The human fleet had lost no ships and taken almost no damage. The remaining alien vessels retreated into jump space faster than Jinwoo had ever seen them move. The Soul Guardian bridge was quiet. For a long time, everyone was trying to understand what had just happened. They had won a battle against impossible odds. Using technology that should not have been able to scratch alien ships, they had not just survived, they had dominated. Sir So Young said finally, "What do we tell Earth Command?" Jinwoo thought about that question. The truth was that he did not know what to tell them. He did not understand what had happened or why. But he knew one thing for certain: the galaxy had been lying about human power for 50 years. Every defeat, every humiliation, every time they had been forced to run away, had been building up to something. Tell them, Jinwoo said, that the universe made a mistake about humanity. Tell them that we are not as weak as everyone thinks. Tell them that the real war is just beginning outside the window. The stars looked different somehow, like they were waiting for something, like they knew that everything was about to change. The age of human weakness was ending, and something far more dangerous was about to take its place. Jinwoo smiled. For the first time in months, the aliens had spent 50 years pushing humanity down, trying to keep them weak and afraid. But every push had made humans stronger. Every defeat had taught them something new. Every humiliation had been adding power to something the galaxy was not ready to face. The Soul Guardian turned toward home, carrying news that would change everything. The universe had lied about humanity power, and now the truth was coming out.